SixtySkills will be. Hello and welcome to the to the Living Crystal presentation. I'll let Bob Smith lead this introduction.
Hello, everybody. Some of you may know me as Bob Smith. Some of you may know me as SixtySkills, but myself, Christian, and Jake are the founders of the Living Crystal. It is the world's first powered meditation device. It's really quite something special. And Jake's going to give us a little presentation on what the device does and how to go about using it. He'll be demonstrating using a travel version of the device. This is the production version of the device. It is powered by a replaceable 9-volt battery. I use a rechargeable battery, and it's really quite delightful. So, Christian, do you have anything to say, or should I send it over to Jake?
That was lovely, Bob. Thank you. Go ahead, Jake. It's your show. Thank you, Jake.
All right. Sounds great. Sounds great. So I'll keep going then. So during this presentation, we'll be covering some of the various aspects, case uses that you can use for the Living Crystal, for your meditation practice, for your healing practice, whatever healing modalities that you do on a daily basis. Living Crystal is fantastic for that and can help enhance any healing abilities, qualities that you're doing. So if you are working as an acupuncturist, if you're in the service industry helping clients one-on-one, then this is a really, really useful device because it can help give you that extra oomph and energy needed throughout the day to keep healing, to keep working with people. So over the last 6 months, we've sent out a lot of different beta units to different users for different use cases, for scrying, for doing remote viewing, for acupuncturist healers, and also more esoteric practices, such as people who practice hermetics. And people have, over the course of that 6 months, have given us tons of feedback and helped us create different iterations and variations of the model. So really quickly, I also want to show you some of those different variations. So I'll go ahead and just share my screen here and show you some of these different units that we've created and how some people are using them in their practice. So as you can see here, are you guys seeing my screen? So, okay, so there is this unit here, which is a golden version of the Living Crystal device. So the gold paint seems to have the effect of making the energy concentrate itself and towards the energy of the sun sphere, so that whatever energy is being pulled through is going to be more positive. Whereas a normal base unit that has the white color amplifies whatever energy you give to it, both positive and or negative. We found that the gold variation of the Living Crystal device had a very positive correlation with creating positive energy. So with all that said, there's also this unit here, which is more and more closer to the more finalized prototype for the Kickstarter version. And you see this person is using a rose quartz with a Living Crystal device next to their desk. So you can have one of these Living Crystal devices and just set it next to you while you're getting some work done, say using like a rose quartz, and that will provide really nice, soft, healing energy whilst you're going throughout your workday. If you are familiar with Franz Barton's Kabbalah, you could also try to charge up one of the crystals with the letter K, and then place that and charge that one of your crystals with that energy. And then what's cool about the Living Crystal device is that it will amplify and continue whatever energy that you input into it only after a few minutes of imbuing it with energy. Because what the Living Crystal device does is it creates a field effect. And I'll show you that a little bit here too. So if I stop sharing the screen real quick, let's see, new share, or let's see, stop sharing. And we'll go back to here. So we're going to go to see this here. So here is this mat with the seed of life, flower of life. This helps the living crystal device on the Akashic level. This flower of life helps on the mental level, astral level, as you're extending out the rings, physical level, and so on. So one thing I like to do when creating crystal grids is use like a foundation base like this. Let's say I want to use the quartz energy, and then I have these two selenite crystals, which I enjoy using. These are really good for connecting with the crown. So I might like placing these like so. And then you can also kind of tune in and start to notice that there is a field effect going on. Depending on what type of healing modalities that you work with, you could also incorporate tarot with the living crystal. So if you're someone who likes to do tarot readings, or if you like to connect with the esoteric aspects of the tarot, you can connect to each one of these different cards, and they will also intercept and play with this sphere effect. So let's say if we incorporate the high priestess into this field here. So if you just try to tune in and feel the energy, you'll notice that the entire field will start to gradually change as you introduce a different tarot card. And now let's introduce the magician. And then notice how further this energy, this feeling changes. Now, let's also try placing this mandala that was in Franz Barden's book on Hermetics, which is a book about how people can progress gradually through their meditation. Notice how the field effect is gradually continuing changing. And I notice this effect is most amplified if you're using cards, when you place the card under the base of the living crystal device. And the effect is more noted when you use one of the other units. When I have gone out to see Christian or Bob Smith of 60Skills and do meditations with them, the spherical prototype of the living crystal seems to have even stronger amplification effect than the travel version. So there is reason why that particular version, the spherical, has the Pythagorean geometry and all and such. Let's see here. If you are someone who uses any Kabbalah work or works with any geometric shapes or patterns, you can incorporate that into your living crystal practice as well. So let's say if you want to work with let's see here. Let's say we're going to work with a letter G from Franz Barden's Kabbalah, right? And incorporate that energy into the living crystal field. So notice how that intersects and plays with the living crystal's energy field. And also notice how the crystals, any other items you place with it, will also change the field, right? And you can include, say, like another crystal, like say this amethyst here, place that, and now you'll also notice the effect change just very slightly and differently. And just so that we get a better sense of isolating one energy down, we'll take out a couple energies, like the magician energy, this high priestess energy, and you'll notice the residual pieces of the energy from that crystal being in this field, and also those two tarot cards. But you'll also notice that these energies that are present are now taking prominence, and it's not just like a visual sight thing. It's something you feel through your clairsentience, through your feeling, sensing gates. And this also applies for other energies you'd want to work with. At the very top of the living crystal device here, you can place all different objects at different shapes, sizes, and so forth that work for you. So let's say this is more of an oval-esque type object. So let's say if we want to do something that is irregularly shaped, like this amethyst here, it's not perfectly shaped. If we place that at the top of the living crystal device and just allow energy from it to emanate, you'll notice over the period of 30, 60 or seconds or a couple minutes that the energy that comes off of this has a very different effect than this oval shape. And it'll have a very different effect from, say, this red coral shape, which connects with the energy of Mars, and this pyramid, which connects with the energy of Saturn. The same can be said with this emerald that connects with the energy of Venus. So let's try using this emerald here that's in a pyramid shape and placing it on top now. And just notice that the different gems, crystals, and whatever items that you place in the living crystal sphere is going to alter the effect and the sensations that you experience whilst connecting through it. If you're someone who does guided meditations, attunements, uses Reiki energy at a distance, or uses any type of distance modalities, using the living crystal device can help and amplify whichever attunements or energy healing sessions you're doing at a distance. And the same can be said that this effect is amplified even further if you're seeing your clients in person. But if you're doing things through Zoom, as many people are, this device is fantastic. So notice how this emerald effect is quite different. Another variation you'll find is if you use a larger crystal ball, that it's going to be even more effective, and you'll feel the amplification of that energy even more. So for fun, we'll now put this red coral over there and see if the energy field, how this Mars red coral energy pulls through. And we have it pulling through the hermetics framework. We have it kind of being filtered through the crown. And we have this green color, right? Which I don't really feel like is too associated with it. So instead, we'll just leave the high priestess. And then we will put in this blue letter K. Now feel how that energy is. It's definitely producing a lot more heat. The energy feels more coarse and like a little bit less filtered. And you're going to feel that effect more amplified when we take this selenite outside the field. So if you're someone who's experimented with crystal grids before, or maybe someone who didn't enjoy doing or using crystal grids in the past, then once you get a living crystal device, I definitely advise you to experiment and play with creating different types of grids and playing around with the energies. Because for me, in my case uses, that's been one of the most fun and most valuable uses out of this, is not only having it run whilst I'm doing my practices, but also having it work for me when I am doing a meditation sit or I'm doing any exercises that involve meditation. And I've also used this for work as well. When I've had to record videos for my course on invocation and evocation, one thing I did was I placed my living crystal device, this red coral, under the base, like so. And that was it. That really helped me be able to concentrate on the production of creating videos. And then I, sometimes I have selenite on each side just to buffer this energy since it's a little bit rough. But this letter K from the Kabbalah helps keep me very concentrated on whatever task I'm doing. So that's a little bit more on the crystal grid aspect. You can also use this for different idols or different deities, beings, figures that you might want to work with. And here we have like a bull figure from Chinese mythology. And here we have a stupa right? A stupa that's used for pulling energy down from the base of the earth up through the very top and facilitating the opening of the crown for people who are practicing Buddhism. And here we have the Sunday Buddha, whose name I do not recollect. These originally were together, but they decided to separate. So I use them separately. And I find that effect to be kind of interesting. So I'll take these items off. Now we just have a naked living crystal of ice, no crystal or anything, until we put on this Buddha. All right, maybe we'll just keep the stupa in the field just to feel that effect. And then we have this Sakyant, meditation mat that is focused on concentration, like the first few lines that are in ancient Khmer script are focused on concentration. So let's place that under the base and see how that effect happens. So now tune into the energy field of the device. And notice how this seems to kind of pull in more Buddhistic energy into the field. Now we'll switch this out and use a stupa instead from Buddhism. And we'll add selenite back inside, just because I like the crown effect that it adds. Right? If you're someone who can tune in to practices that are at a distance, try tuning in and connecting through your crown and try pulling energy, doing the 3 transformations, pulling energy from its vital physical form up to astral, mental, and then above your crown. And then you can use this living crystal of ice like a stupa to enhance that effect when transforming energy through you, when doing internal alchemy. Okay, so I'm going to sift through some cards here and then place the right card. So what's cool about working with the tarot deck with the living crystal of ice is what not a lot of people know about each of these cards is that each of them has a very, very distinct living energy to it. So when you add that to the living crystal's field, you may feel your tarot cards or tarot deck that you're working with very differently for the first time, where these might have felt like static, non-living devices that didn't have, maybe they didn't speak to you, or maybe you read them symbolically. But once you introduce them to the living crystal's field, so here we have the foolish man, the high priestess, and we'll also introduce the magician card and the moon. So one thing you'll notice is that the living crystal device, especially when there is a crystal on top, will start to imbue these with the energy. So here we have an amethyst crystal, which is going to give a more Akashic flavor to this, right? It's going to allow you to attune to each of these cards more above the crown and help you attune some of the different gifts that each of these cards represent into your field. This is much easier when you are doing this in person, but if you've done distance transmissions through Magi or through 60Skills or through my programs, then you can tune into it even at a distance. And the living crystal device helps in the amplification of that effect. Now we're going to move this Sapiant there. And let's put these at each respective corner. The moon in the back, high priestess here, magician here, and the foolish man down here. You can also introduce some of the minor arcana as well. So let's say if we introduce the Ace of Cups, and let's place that southeast here between the foolish man and the magician. Notice how the effect of that changes, right? Like how all these different energies, all these different beings, entities are linking to each other as they have an energy source to be fed from. So they're activating. So you can activate all your tarot decks, crystals, magical equipment, acupuncture equipment, anything that you use for your mindfulness practices. You can use the living crystal device as a base station to charge the energy that you've already imbued into each object. If you have like a tarot deck and you don't know how to activate it, there's a good chance that it will just activate on its own. However, if you already have specific attunements, like say for this Kabbalah deck here that has each of the Kabbalah cards as spoken about in Franz Barton, then already having those attunements with the teacher is extremely beneficial. However, if you have really good mantle transference abilities, then you also can buy a Kabbalah deck like this, and then place it within the living crystal device. And there's a much greater chance of success of getting attunements to these independently than you would have had otherwise. Although I still recommend you at least get attuned to the, where's E? There we go. Getting attuned to the letter E, right? Which is this one here. I don't know if the text is readable. It's probably backwards. Okay. So that's what I have to present for that part of the presentation, just to show and demonstrate some various use cases of the living crystal. I'm going to go over some questions real quick that we have in the chat. One question we have is there a difference between the intensity between the portable size versus this full size, the model? In my personal experience, yes. However, when I have worked with the full size model, I've also worked with other practitioners. So when you're working with a living crystal device alone versus with other practitioners or other people, there is a very strong amplification effect of whatever energies you're working with. It's a similar type of amplification effect that happens when you're working with a group in a meditation session, or when we're doing any high level energy work, Qigong, Reiki, so forth. But the amplification effects I found to be much, much further. The amplification effect that happens with one as an individual is heightened dramatically. And that also applies to each individual practitioner who happens to be in the room at that time. And so in addition, when you practice with other people in general, there's an amplification effect of whatever ritualistic intent you have for the duration of that practice, for whatever you're working on. So what I have found is that not only is each participant, their awareness, their clairsentience, their ability to feel, and the energy they have to work with is extremely heightened, then they have that group effect that stacks on top of that, which creates a much, much larger living crystal field effect for whatever energies that you're working with. So when I've done that in particular, playing around with different Kabbalistic letters or introducing different crystals, planetary energies, or different variations of Reiki seem to have much more significant variations when felt that clairsentiently. And I assume this would work for any other modalities you're working with that are dependent on sensitivity to different types of energy work. So the living crystal device is pretty fascinating, and it's super, super fun to play with. And if you have friends to play with, then you're going to feel this amplification effect even further. And coming back to your point, yes, I do notice that the larger model has more more oomph to it. Whether it's the kind of Euclidean geometry and so forth, the spherical shape, I noticed that there's quite a huge different effect on the energy as well. I've also noticed the same effect when I've compared my model here, which is the travel, which is one of the earlier iterations of the travel model. The travel model is now even smaller than this one and has been made down to about that size, right, from here to there. And now and I've noticed there's a difference between this version, and also the version that is painted gold, which also kind of concentrates, filters energy, whereas this one amplifies whatever energy is there. So let's say if I have a crystal that I haven't cleaned too much, there's might be some stickiness, maybe it was like some, just has bad residual from whatever reason. Maybe it was at a shop where the owners were kind of grungy or had sticky energy. Then you may want to wash that, because if you stick it on the living crystal device, some of that energy may be picked up. So, having some base awareness about, knowing how to, soak your crystals in water, salt, or do anything to demagnetize any negative aspects of any energies you're working with, is important when, using a model that's white. If you use a model that has a gold color to it, it's going to filter out the energy, but it's going to be less efficient, just because the extra weight of any negative magnetized energy to crystal or object that you might use with living crystal device will have that effect. So let's keep going through these questions. Yeah, so Bob Smith at SixtySkills just mentioned all you need to do is stand next to it. If you have the skill to project a given energy into it, the device will begin to generate that. And that's exactly the same experience and effect I've had, as well as other people I've introduced this device to in person. Okay, so we have someone asking, if I achieve a milestone in meditation with the Heko of the crystal, will I be able to perform just as well later without the crystal? I found that once you have the baseline energy of whatever the crystal gives to you, as long as you're maintaining a journal practice, or as long as you're able to recollect with great clarity that experience you had when you were generating that energy with the living crystal, you'll get a very similar, if not exact, match to frequency or to that energetic signature you worked with previously. However, getting to that state alone without the living crystal device takes a lot more work. And I find the living crystal to be extremely time efficient when I want to connect with a certain frequency, or go back to a previous frequency that I worked with in the past and amplify that even further. That could be the Reiki symbols for those of us who are Reiki practitioners. That could be different energies of the planets by using a energy that's correlated with one of the set planets, and amplifying that effect. Or if you're working through the initiation exercises through Hermetics, that could be working with one of those exercises, placing the book of Franz Barton within the field of the living crystal device, and the living crystal will help bring clarity and amplify the wattage you get whilst you're practicing any of those exercises. And the effect. Yeah.
Let me interject here for a second. Sorry for interrupting. Sure. One of the things about the device is it has an effect energetically that is very much akin to resistance training. Normally when we do our meditations with Reiki, Qigong, what have you, we're limited to the amount of energy in our ambient area to work with. By giving us more energy, it allows you to work with that energy at a higher frequency or higher amplitude, if you will. And so that then pushes your development forward a little bit more. So it's a lot like the difference between body weight or resistance-based exercise. By giving you that little extra bit of resistance, it actually propels your development forward much quicker. But there's still that stress adaptation aspect to it where, all right, you do it, you have to go back, you recover, you're not quite as strong as you were with the device, but then you go back and forth and it gradually builds. So hopefully that didn't interrupt your flow there too much, Jake.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you for that addition, Bob. That really, that hits it on the nail. Another question we have is, can the device help with balancing the elements? And to that, I say absolutely, absolutely. And Christian had a really, really good setup for doing that exact practice. And I'll show you what we used for balancing the elements. So if you're seeing my screen here, you'll notice that we have this device right here. So this version of the living crystal, the normal base version, but what you do is you use a plate or a bowl, have some water in it and a candle burning. And what you're doing essentially here is it's creating elemental equilibrium without having to, for you, the practitioner, to generate anything at all, right? You have the element of water interfacing with the element of pure fire. And when doing meditations with this particular setup on top of, playing with any crystals or other things within the field, the effect is amplified profoundly because you're working with two living elements. So I found that to be one of the more effective and most fun ways to use a living crystal device. So I'm glad you asked that question. So using a candle and a bowl of water, you'll attain elemental equilibrium without any effort, which is actually, it's mostly an advantage, but there's also some disadvantages too. If you don't know how to already establish elemental equilibrium with whatever type of modality you're working with, whether that's Hermetics, Taoism, being able to have all the elements and be equalized with them, equanimous with them, is very important. So the living crystal device, in some sense, lets you cheat and cut past a lot of the prerequisite work that most people have to do with different systems, holding postures or building up these elements for dozens, if not hundreds of hours before attaining any sort of sense or clairsentient feeling of equilibrium in each respective hemisphere of your body, or just an overall feeling of equilibrium. Because living crystal is a field, creates a field effect, I noticed that this creates an elemental equilibrium as a field. So I haven't particularly felt it in each respective region for doing that exercise. But if you had 4 living crystal devices, or just had even 2, creating a quadrupolar magnet would be very, very doable and very easy, as it is with this device. But this focuses on a field effect as opposed to doing it in isolated regions of the body, which, as you get more advanced as a practitioner of any type of meditation or yogic art, the more you're chasing that field effect versus isolated parts of the body anyway. So for that instance, it cuts, you could say it cuts a lot of corners and gets you the results. Once you have that energy signature, yes, you can tune back into it, but it's nothing like going through the process and learning how to build each different element respectively on its own time. So I hope that adds some clarity to your question. This is my favorite setup to use for going directly into elemental equilibrium. And this works for people who have not done any practice as well, for the most part. As long as they have some level of energy sensitivity, they can tune into the living crystal effect field and device. And particularly with this setup, because this amplifies so much energy. Okay. What other questions do we have? So just to be clear, if the unit is used without any cards or crystals, it will just amplify whatever method or technique is practiced by the person in its vicinity. Let's see. Yeah. And if you use like a quartz crystal, especially one that's more spherical, you can program that whatever intent you have with it, and it will amplify that effect. But using the living crystal naked, well, I like doing that too sometimes. I pretty much 99% of the time will have something on top of it, right? And 90% of the time, 95% of the time, I'll have something under it as well, just so I get the most out of the field effect, right? So if you are familiar with the toroidal field from doing any type of meditation practice and kind of pulling energy up through here and having that spherical effect, it's very, very powerful. The living crystal device creates a toroidal field. And so one thing that you can take advantage of when you have that toroidal field effect is having something entering through the toroidal field and exiting the toroidal field. So what's exiting is more of the amplifier. It's more what you'll pick up through your clairsentience. What's entering, creates a strong baseline. So let's see here. So let's see, next questions here. So Jason, how can I attain a few of these devices? Well, I'm going to send a link to everybody here in the chat. And it's my link to the page where you can register for a pre-order of one of these living crystal units. It's not going to be this baseline unit. It's going to look more like the one that Bob Smith of 60Skills presented. Or it's going to look like the one that we just shared earlier with the fire and water. I'm going to pin Bob Smith here just so you can see him. So this is how the version on Kickstart is going to look like. This is what we found to be optimal for most use cases.
So the base unit is right here. Again, you can put any kind of crystal or object you want on top of it. It's powered by a simple 9-volt battery. Each battery tends to last for a good 20 hours of continuous use time. So it's pretty thrifty. What I advise most people to do is get a pack of those rechargeable 9-volt batteries. And that works pretty well. That way you're only out the money for batteries once. I've run these units for as much as 8 or 10 hours at a time, and they're quite robust. They're also weighted, so they stand down pretty well as well. And yeah, they're delightful.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed between my unit, for example, is a travel unit, so it's not weighted. Something about having some of that weight and some of the earth element that is contained with the weighted version does have more energy amplifying effects. So there are trade-offs to getting to the lightest, smallest, more explorable version. So in the meantime, we're focused more on this weighted version because it has the most effective energy effects for beginners and advanced practitioners alike, whether you're doing Reiki or going through the initiation framework or whatever your practice you're doing. So that's one reason we have it going as that. So will the units come with instructions based on the specific exercises that we do? Yeah, I think one thing that we've looked at is connecting with different like affiliates who are interested in making videos about different various aspects for different case uses. For example, on my website, Mystery College, and on my YouTube channel, Mystery College, I have some case uses of using living crystal device for people who are energy healers, who are working with Reiki, acupuncture, and so forth, and how they can use a living crystal device. I also have mentioned in this presentation a few case uses as well for that particular purpose. In addition, I've also showed how you can use the living crystal device to path work through a meditation, yogic, or magic system like the initiation text. Bob? Go for it, Bob.
Unmute. There we go. All right. It'll also come with links to 2 videos that you can download that just show me how to use the device in a very basic manner, core breathing, programming of energy, and this kind of thing. So that said, almost everybody here has a variety of yogic practice they engage in. And so I imagine you will find all kinds of amazing uses for it.
Okay, so we'll remove our pin. We got tons of questions. So let's figure out how I got to keep just doing whichever new ones come through, and then I'll come back. We'll go over time for those people who'd like to go over time. So let's see, if you offered printed cloths with sacred geometry and so forth to put around the LCD, I'd buy that too. Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. One thing I've experimented with is placing small pieces of cloth or fabric that are imbued with different patterns under and over the living crystal device. And, I think there's a great case point where, having it on each or either side definitely changes the effect of the energy that's emitted. Kind of like like a colored lantern, which some people use when they're working with various beings of like the different planets or solar spheres, is that they use different colors to emit certain energies to connect with, so that the environment you're in immediately, or if you're working internally, is more suitable for inviting beings that are not from our sphere respectively, right? And that's for the people who practice those types of yoga arts like deity yoga or invocation, evocation, and so forth. So we have a message from Dexter. Greetings. Does this device start operating? Does it produce heat energy? Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It can produce heat energy, but also can produce more cooling types of energy too. Bob, do you have anything to add to that as far as the production of like a heat generative energy versus like a cool energy? Because it's definitely depending on where I pull the energy from, respectively, from the living crystal field, like through the crown, or if I'm focusing on my pineal glands or my heart center, or the dantian, right? Like lower dantian. The effect of it is very different, and it can produce heat if I'm using that energy to concentrate in a particular area. But the field effect is rather cooling overall for me.
Yeah. One of the effects of opening the channels in the body, particularly if you're dealing with a new energy that you haven't worked with before, is there tends to be a bit of a heating effect. It is generally transient. The energy that comes out of the living crystal, if you just use like a lead glass globe, which we send out with the units, by the way, generally is temperature inert. It's typically a bunch of mental energy and a little bit of astral energy and a small amount of vital energy. As a non-living, as a device that doesn't have a physical body that's breathing, the astral and vital energy aspects are quite curious, because normally you have to have a body and breath to generate that kind of force. So in a long-winded way, it doesn't generate heat unless you want to program it to do so. That said, it works very well if you put a candle on top of it or any kind of fiery red stone. Works very, very well for that. If you just want pure vital energy, a piece of amber works exceptionally well. And please keep in mind, none of these things need to be terribly large. To the degree that the size of anything seems to matter much, the size of the crystal in the base unit seems to have more of an effect than the size of the crystal on top of it. This also makes it very convenient for travel or taking it with you. So hopefully I didn't steal too much of your mojo there, Jake.
Yeah, that was perfect. I appreciated your additions. I think that was super useful. And yeah, so I think everything you had to say there, Bob, was on the money, on top of it. So is there a way we could buy the Kabbalah cards in the future? That depends on whether people, like whether Bob or Christian are interested in mass producing those. Like we've produced some of these cards like overall in like a little deck respectively for people who are in our insider Kabbalah group, so that they have access to work with those energies, and it makes it much easier for some folks to hold, say, 4 or more Kabbalistic letters together at once, being able to see each of those respective colors, and then on those cards, if you haven't had the letter A totally memorized, for example, you can place one of those respective qualities in one of the respective fields. Another great exercise for generating elemental equilibrium as well, if you're working with that particular spiritual modality. So I don't know if you can buy the cards in the future, but I've definitely talked to the rest of the team and advocated that is an option if we can find a print on demand service that can print it to the specifications and color grading that we required to be able to tune into the right frequency, the right energy signatures, and B, whether it makes sense to do that coinciding with this kickstart launcher or afterwards, or as potentially a bonus depending if we hit a certain milestone. So we're still playing around with the idea, but there has been a lot of demand. We have been getting a lot of private messages, especially since I posted the video on Mystery College where I did that demonstration with those Kabbalah cards. So there's definitely an interest, and I think personally it'd be a huge addition and value for people who are practicing with Kabbalah to have those cards, because there's nothing quite like those little cards. And with the living crystal device, it just brings added wattage. It's a huge bonus, in my opinion. Let's see here. So how would this work with sound healing like Tibetan bowls and gong baths? Awesome question. I think out of us three, Christian has the most experience working with Tibetan bowls and gong baths in relation to the living crystal device. So I think he can add to that.
I can talk on that briefly. So I in Chiang Mai, there's Chiang Mai Holistics, and I'm good friends with the owner, and he has one of the first prototypes. And what we noticed is that when he gave his gong baths, the vibration was just so strong that, it was, you felt the physical vibration and you really had to tune in to the crystal. I think it was valuable if you could do that, and then also just charging the area with the crystal and the Tibetan bowls, but also the crystal bowls were really quite powerful. So I think with anything that has a high physical vibration, these subtle vibrations end up getting kind of lost. However, you really need to tune into it. I mean, we live in a coarse and sharp world. So when we engage in this, we have to keep silent somewhat and acquire that stillness, and then this subtle. I hope I answered that question. And going back to the Kabbalah cards. I mean, I have some Kabbalah cards left. You can always contact me, and periodically we do some small runs of them. So we don't really advertise them. However, just come to me and then we can figure something out. All right, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And is there any way that they can get in touch with you, maybe through the Living Crystal, or
you can get info at thelivingcrystal.com is probably the best way. I'll add that email here.
Awesome. Great, thank you, Christian. Appreciate it. Yeah, and I guess another question for you, Christian, is what is the timeline for availability?
We're going to have a meeting today to determine, exactly when we're going to start the Kickstarter. And right now we have a loose date of next week on Tuesday. So definitely within this month, we're determining whether or not Tuesday will be good for us. However, we should decide that today, and we'll send out emails to everyone so that they can prepare.
Awesome.
And so just as a note, so when will it really be available to be sent out? So once we have the Kickstarter, we'll have 30 to 45 days of the campaign. And then after that, roughly a month and a half. And then we'll start mailing the units out to the ones that have paid for it, contributed to the campaign.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Christian. That was great. And so a question for either Bob or Christian is, do you think this device will revolutionize the meditative arts and or become mainstream?
In terms of the meditative arts, absolutely. It's the first device of its kind, and quite honestly, if you really go back through the historical records of what people have been doing in the meditative communities, it's the first significant addition of technology since basically the time of the Egyptians. So, yeah, I think it's going to be very helpful for any number of people. As for mainstream adaptation, really depends upon how comfortable the general public becomes with these practices. You know, we're in a very interesting time right now where you can talk openly about these kinds of things in a way that traditionally you couldn't. Now, that's not to say that will remain the case. I mean, historically, it hasn't always been that way, but it's something that anybody with even a baseline of energetic sensitivity tends to key into right away. We've done a few little tests where we put one in a corner of a room, turned on, but with the LED, the light filament disabled, and people would just walk by and immediately point on the device from across the room. So it's something that, again, even if you have just a little bit of sensitivity to, people tend to key into almost immediately. And it's quite curious because we've done a variety of laboratory tests, and the only thing the unit seems to be generating that we can account for is a very weak magnetic field. And what we did determine, in case anybody's worried about that, is that the magnetic field created by your computer is actually stronger. So I don't think there are any health ramifications to worry about, but I think it's definitely going to change the way people train other people and how people work with it. For example, I've worked with a couple of very high-level remote viewers, and they mentioned that it dramatically reduces their workload and improves the results they're getting almost immediately. And these are not people who are really trained in Reiki or Qigong or this kind of thing either. So yeah, I think it's going to have a huge effect upon the community that's going to be very positive and quite possibly open the door to a bunch of people that normally wouldn't be attracted to these things. So awesome.
Great. And I got another question I'm going back through the webinar chat just to make sure everyone's questions get addressed. From EM, most people get stuck at the vacancy of mind exercise in initiation into Hermetics, which is a framework of or path for people to get more clairsentience, more sensitivity energy, and to do more advanced high-level yogic and meditative work. So within that framework, there's an exercise called vacancy of mind. And you can briefly explain what that is and how you could use this device for that basic exercise. And let's say for concentration, for example, or emptiness of thoughts.
Sure. The device we found drops people into a state of trance very quickly. So all that kind of background mental chatter that most people have really goes away within seconds. It's quite remarkable. Now, traditionally, when training these kinds of things or single-pointed focus exercises, the assumption has always been that we had to teach people to concentrate first, and that's what took so long. Interestingly enough, apparently the amount of internal energy someone has plays a big role in that. And whatever energy the living crystal device creates appears to be very similar to that. So most people find their vacancy of mind practices where they just maintain this empty space in their mind with no thought coming through it, tends to happen very quickly. And it's really quite curious. And the effects tend to carry on for a couple days afterwards. So in many ways, this goes back to that example I used with resistance versus body weight training exercise. It seems to have a training effect upon the individual as well. So one of the little games I like to play with the device is I use it to generate a very high amplitude or amount of energy. Then I turn it off and I recreate that on my own and kind of go back and forth as it comes in and out. And the effects seem to be largely in line with exercise. As long as you continue to practice, you get the effect, and over time you get stronger. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, fantastic. And what kind of crystal would you say would be most effective in achieving vacancy of mind, like amethyst or just a quartz crystal?
I've generally found that a simple glass ball, like the one that we ship with the units, works exceptionally well for that. What we're still trying to figure out is the properties of all the different stones and rocks and other compounds and substances you can use. What we have found is that the books written on crystals and stones appear to largely be correct. The phenomena that they say they're generating pretty much work exactly as they would with a living crystal, just much stronger. So I would start with just the glass ball and then experiment. Like I said, amber creates a kind of vital or invigorating force in the body, and we kind of go from there. Yeah, so that's what I got on that one.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. That's great. And then each of the units comes with one of those little glass units. It's a great reminder. And we're gonna just hop up here to this question, which is, do you know how much this device will cost? Like what's sort of the range we're looking at for the Kickstarter?
Christian, are you still there? Can you speak to that? Maybe. Hello?
Let's see. Is your webcam on, Christian? Seems to be off right now.
Yeah.
Okay, it seems like Christian's having some bandwidth problems. So once his camera pops on, we'll add him to the chat and get back to that question.
We launched that for $100.
Oh, it seems like his connection cut completely. Okay. All right. So how should we cleanse the crystal wrapped in coil? With vital energy or solar energy, soap and water? What do you recommend?
I do not recommend soap and water. It is an electrical device. You can use a soft cloth. If you like sage or these kinds of things, you can push that over it. But if you have the ability to clean it with energy directly, that works exceptionally well. So yeah, it's pretty much maintenance free, other than needing to change battery every once in a while.
Yeah. Do you think this device could help with artistic creativity?
Absolutely. By expanding your mental space, it makes your mind much more flexible. If you have the ability to work with sigils or sacred geometry that have to do with creativity, again, it's an excellent tool for that. If you're into things like Barton's Kabbalah, the letter Z or Z works very well for this as well. So yeah, absolutely, it could help with that. In fact, I think it also helps with learning because it expands your mental space. If you're studying something, it seems to allow for recollection, memorization, and the ability to work with material much easier.
Yeah, yeah. And for reference here, you could connect with these two colors here, Z or A, respectively. If you're working with the Kabbalah frequency, right? Z, or that levity, that ease of mind, and also the enjoyment of learning, and for it to just kind of click and stick naturally. And the letter T can help with that as well, where whatever stream of consciousness you're connecting with just really sinks in. So good for lucid dreaming if you want to remember first thing in the morning and write that down. And then A, because it's literally just pure air element mental expansion, a mother letter for those who practice that practice. Does it have effect with mental wandering and astral projection?
Mental wandering, very much so. Like I said, the remote viewers we've worked with have reported significant improvements and significant decreases in the workload required. In fact, I've even had people sleep with the unit on, so there doesn't seem to be any problem with that, as long as the light, obviously doesn't interrupt your sleep patterns. I myself have been doing mental wandering for quite a few years, what most people call astral projection, and it's definitely deepened those experiences over the last couple of years of working with the device. So yeah, I think it will absolutely help with that as well.
Awesome. Awesome. We got another interesting question here, which is has anyone had report experiences with plant medicine or consciousness altering substance while using the device? And my advice to that before Bob or Christian add to that is to and before we get to that question, we're at the hour. However, so some of the panelists will stay on and talk, or all of us may. So for those of you who are short on time or have an appointment to make, we thank you for showing up for this presentation. And I just posted a link in the chat if you would like to sign up to the pre-order page or to the Kickstarter. So you input your email, your name, and then you'll be added to be notified first when the Kickstarter goes live for this device. So again, I really thank you. So does Bob and Christian. We're really appreciative for your time here to, explore, a brand new technology in the yogic, meditative, and practical arts. And is there a link to the recording? Yes, the link will be posted later. Oh, the Mecca there, Christian. Okay. Right. So let's get back to the question, because that was really interesting. So my recommendation is, before you ingest any plant medicines or conscious altering substances in conjunction with the living crystal device, is if that's something you choose. I don't condone or necessarily recommend that. However, if it's a path that you choose to take, then what I would recommend doing is placing the object, whether that be a psilocybin mushroom, or even if it's something like an ibuprofen. Before you take an ibuprofen, you pick it up with your hands, you feel it in your hand and feel, okay, do I really need this for my headache? And your body, your energy system will react accordingly, right? Whether that's, if you're familiar with qi or Tao systems, there's protective qi, and that protective qi will inform you and give you an immediate gut reaction as to whether you should ingest this or not. And typically it's no. Our bodies don't really like foreign substances too much, because our bodies appreciate equilibrium over anything else, which is why that equilibrium and balance is encouraged overall. But but if what I would do is I'd place that within the field of the living crystal device, or even on top of it, and then if you have clairsentience, or if you have any ability, you can also tune into the medicinal qualities of the plant. You can connect to the spirits of said plants. If that's marijuana, put marijuana bud there, and then connect to whatever that energy is. And if you have done any advanced magical work, and you're still participating with those types of substances, then you can connect it to the energy of the sun sphere and try to figure out what the real lesson is behind whatever that substance is. And I recommend you do that and really figure out and do the soul, look at the mirror to yourself as to why you're ingesting those things, and what are you trying to attain, and can you attain that same state naturally with either allopathic medicine that's approved by a doctor, in which case it's fine. But if it's mind altering, it will be mind altering, because Western doctors aren't particularly informed about these topics or about naturopathy. However, Bob Smith is, so he'll have more to add to that.
At a minimum, you need to keep in mind the device amplifies energies. And so if you're going to add a mind-altering substance into the mix, you need to be very careful with that, because again, it makes effects stronger. I don't have any experience with that, because I'm just too sensitive to go getting involved these kinds of things. What I can tell you is that if you're an herbalist or an alchemist, or someone who works with charging medicines or consecrating things that you imbibe or eat, it does a very good job of strengthening the effect of those medicines, herbs, or other compounds. So again, that's not something that we've explored from a research perspective, so I don't have anything more than just a theoretical basis to it. But what I've noticed is that herbs charged with this are quite a bit stronger than they are without it. And for that, you're going to want the herb or plant or medicine or what have you to basically sit in the vicinity of the object for a few hours. So that's what we found so far.
Yeah. And then what is the lesson of each of the substances in our abuse? Or is it something you figure out on the path? Oh, I mean, if you tune into energies of different substances, you can also see the karmic implications they've had. Let's say that they've had socioeconomically, economically to people's mind, like the incidences of schizophrenia and usage of marijuana in Oregon or other areas that are doing clinical research trials and recording these metrics. I've noticed a huge increase in schizophrenia related incidents from people who are ingesting marijuana, for example, which in most people's mind is a very safe substance. However, each and every substance works on a spectrum where some people might be ultra sensitive to something, where it could break something or awaken epigenetically something in their DNA that's schizoid, or that pulls them further from their own path or whatever they were meant to do while they're alive. Or you have people on the other side of the spectrum who, they relatively are much less affected by a substance. So you're playing roulette with each and every substance you experiment to ingest with. So that's why it's not advised. One of many reasons, but each substance has its own karmic path. And then that relates solely to the individual itself, and also societally, the societal karma of that's very interesting as well. Let's say 80s crack cocaine epidemic, that's its own thing. That's its own kind of egregoric field and power, capital, accumulation prowess through those different entities. And then, of course, induced extreme levels of violence. So I don't know. I hope I'm not getting too off topic here.
I just got some information from Christian. The price point we're looking at is just under $100. Again, depending upon production run, it might just be a little bit above that, plus shipping and handling. So this is to answer Arturo's question about the price point. We're really trying to keep it as affordable as possible, and because we want people to be able to enjoy it. And so that's pretty much how that works. Later on, of course, there will be more customizable units that people can order. And that would have to be a discussion depending upon what you want to use it for and how big it needs to be. I would love to build several of these things that are, 3 meters tall and set them up at rock shows. I think that'd be great fun. But that will be a project for the future.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Let's see. Is there a link to this recording? Yes. How should be cleaned? I'm just scrolling through the chat here, making sure everyone's questions have been answered. So if any of you do have any questions, add them to the chat, and then we can add them to the queue. So, do you need a crystal, or are you just working with vital energy? Do you need a crystal, Bob? I guess it comes with a base unit, glass sphere, and that's all you really need to start working with these energies. I like using crystals personally for my practice.
You don't need to. What we found is that a sphere, or even just a plain crystal stone, does an excellent job of attenuating the energy. If it comes directly out of the projector itself, that can come across as a little harsh to some people. And we found that the stones, or again, just a normal glass sphere, works very well for just softening it and giving it more of a field effect. Because if you point it at somebody, it can be a little harsh by itself. But if you have the ability to transform energy, it's really not much of a problem.
Yeah. And someone just wanted to let you know, like, to make sure Tony Robbins doesn't get his hands on the 6-foot versions.
We're working on getting some patents, but that of course involves government, so who knows how that'll go. But I would love to be able to license this technology writ large to any number of people so that they could go forth and do amazing things.
Awesome. And what's the backstory behind the creation of this device?
The short answer is it came out of a series of meditations about 4 years ago. The actual story is very long, but it's the first thing that I've ever gotten from the meditative process that resulted in an actionable piece of technology. And that's been quite a surprise, because as everybody knows, you go into meditation, you see all kinds of crazy things, right? And most of it is either personal towards your development, or a lot of it just ends up being some really wild stuff. I mean, let's be honest, it's cheaper than the movies and usually a lot more entertaining. But this is the first thing I've come up with in my practice that introduced a whole new technology to the realm. And just very curious to see where it goes. So hopefully that answered everybody's question.
Yeah, fantastic. And yeah, and just to confirm, it is a glass sphere, not a quartz sphere, that comes with the base unit, right?
Correct. We tried both, and a glass sphere does an excellent job of just dispersing the energy. And so we found we didn't need to go with a quartz sphere. Quartz takes on more of a slightly living vibration, if that makes any sense. I'm not exactly sure why, but it does. And so again, we encourage everybody to experiment, and cross-pollinate, and come up with the most amazing applications that you can, because we want this to benefit everybody.
Yeah, yeah, and I believe this is the last question. But if anyone wants to, roll a few extra questions in there, go for it now. This is the time. So what is the advantage of buying 2 living crystal devices instead of, say, 1?
Well, it really depends on what you want to use it for. I've got some, because I'm not the best production engineer in the world. I have some very, kind of primitive units that I made out of stuff from Home Depot. And what I like to do is put them in the 4 corners and charge them with the 4 elements. And that tends to create this very nice sense of peace and equilibrium and balance in the room. A lot of people that I've talked to who are working acupuncturists expressed an interest in putting 1 in each one of their treatment rooms. That way they don't have to carry it around. I find it to be very energizing, so it's not the best thing for sleep for me, but I'm also very sensitive to light. So it may just be a matter that the light being emitted by the crystal itself is keeping me awake. But I would encourage people to experiment. And I think it would be easy to project a kind of electric force into one unit and a magnetic force into another, and just kind of feel what that polarity does in the body. You could also put it in your weightlifting room, or a place where you do resistance exercise, so you can run various energies through that kind of work. Really, the applications are pretty much endless. And I don't think it'd be too far, I guess, to go if you put it in a kitchen. It would probably help with that as well. So, hey, good stuff.
Awesome. So we got our last questions rolling in here. Will there be a hardwired version at some point?
In terms of like a USB power pack or something like that?
Yeah, if Michael, if you wouldn't mind explaining that a little bit more, so you have a bit more detail. But like, say mine, for example, being a production unit, has it hardwired like this. So I just plug it into USB outlet. Usually these are detachable, right? The benefit of this is that I don't ever have to replace this battery for as long as this battery lives, whether that's 500, 800, 1,000 plus cycles. Yeah, so batteries, okay, yeah. So I guess, will there be a hardwired version then?
At some point, probably, for just reasons of production efficacy, we're efficiency, we're going with a 9-volt battery setup. But again, it works just fine with a rechargeable battery. So that's kind of a one-time cost. So yeah, that's something we're looking at.
Yeah. And does the glass make it fragile to ship with?
No, actually, the box that we ship it in, and again, it has a cardboard box about, on top of this, comes with padding in the inside and bubble wrap. So it just holds everything in place. We've shipped a bunch of these units worldwide to beta testers, and we haven't had one break yet. So far, so good. And of course, if there's ever an issue, just give us a call and we'll figure something out.
Awesome. Well, it seems like no more questions are rolling in. Is there anything you, Bob, or Christian would like to add before we start coming to a close?
I appreciate everyone's time. Of course, we're trying to grow awareness of the living crystal. So if anybody out there wants to let any of their friends know, please do that. If anybody knows any of those great influencers out there who are crystal crazy, please get in contact with us, and we would love to work with them as well. Otherwise, we're going to be having another one of these in about a week for the European audience. That should be a little more time effective for them. So hopefully we can do this all again. And of course, we'll be posting a link to the recording and having it up on both the 60Skills YouTube channel and the Living Crystal YouTube channel as well.
Fantastic. Anything from Christian?
I think we lost Christian to the vagaries of internet connectivity.
Yeah, I suppose we have. So here we Okay, Living Crystal Ambassador.
Yep.
Let's post that in the chat. Thanks for DMing us that. I'm not able to select it. Let's see here. I'm going to post that in the chat. So if any of you would like to become Living Crystal ambassadors or have people in your network, friends, associates who have a following or who are into spirituality, meditation, crystals, yoga, or any healing modalities and would like to, participate with that, then there's that link below for you all. And is the Living Crystal YouTube channel easy to find by just Googling it? Or should we link it now for our participants?
Let me see if I can grab a link for you right quick.
Okay, great. Yeah, and for people who are going to be ambassadors or affiliates, we have people who are independently creating content about the Living Crystal or answering questions about it in video format. So there's a repository of information and case uses for how people can incorporate the Living Crystal into their practice. What's fun about the device is that it's individuated to your specific goals, your specific needs as a practitioner, as a meditator, or as a healer. So or as a teacher. So whatever you're using it for, it's going to help amplify it further because energy in, energy out, but amplified. So here, 60Skills just posted the channel link below in the chat. So for folks who are still on with us, you're welcome to click the link in the chat to subscribe to the Living Crystal YouTube channel.
And we'll be posting a variety of media and videos on that over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned.
Okay, awesome. We got one last question from, and it's about AI. What are our opinions about artificial intelligence? Well, I'll add my piece and I know Bob will certainly add his piece after. But the adoption of every other social media platform took years, or at the very fastest, say 4 months to get their first 1 million users once it launched. The ChatGPT took 5 days, which respectively is an extremely powerful narrative as to the dramatic transformation that artificial intelligence can and will have on society. So I'm of the opinion that artificial intelligence, is will be getting exponentially better and better. And the implications that we'll have for different fields, different practices, will be tremendous. I don't think it will replace people necessarily in the foreseeable future, but it will be used as a great tool for people who are copywriters, for programmers, and so forth. So it'll help do much more workload.
Yeah. Knowing some people who are actively involved in that enterprise, what they have to say about it is that AI built for specific purposes, whether that's, say, engineering or financial markets, will tend to be fairly good. General purpose AI is going to be another issue entirely. And it's probably going to take a while, and has a lot to do with processing power and just the lack of readily available information when it comes to niche topics. So I have a friend who deals with historical jewelry. It's their job to go out and find these things, validate them, price them, clean them, care for them, restore them, so on and so forth. And they asked one of the better known chatbots to write a paper on a very specific topic involving historical jewelry and its appraisal. What they got back as of today was written at about a 5th grade level. So it was coherent, it was articulate, but part of the issue is there isn't a whole lot of information on that kind of thing available in the general public. So that limits the ability of the AI to scan and collate information. That should get better over time. What I can also tell you is that all of the major advertisers are actively working to identify AI generated content and basically ban it. So I think that's going to be a cat and mouse kind of game out there. But in terms of general purpose usage, I think it's got a ways to go. If you're talking a more specifically narrowly tailored AI, I mean, it's already there. Aircraft, for example, haven't actually needed a pilot in them, and I'm talking airliners, for a number of years now. In some cases, the pilot's just there for safety reasons and liability issues. But the plane itself can take off, fly to a location, and most of the time land on its own. That most of the time issue is not something passengers tend to be very comfortable with, which is why we have pilots who are there to handle the more difficult parts of that. And of course, that will get better over time. So I have friends in the trucking industry, and they had some big concerns about that. And what I said was, listen, to be blunt about it, there will be a man inside the cab of the truck for the foreseeable future, because the first time grandma's dog gets run over in the street by an AI-driven truck, you're going to have a problem. Now, what I can tell you in terms of progression of that technology is that I was at a test facility in Arizona about 17 years ago, when the very first AI-driven trucks were being looked at for government work. And they were pretty bad. They were running over curbs and having all kinds of problems. 5 years later, we went back and watched this again. And now these were supermassive vehicles moving at 100 kilometers an hour down narrow streets pretty safely. So again, for specific functions, I think AI is going to change the way a lot of things are done. But keep in mind societal and liability issues. I will also say that in terms of general intelligence, i.e. thinking like a person, it's probably going to take a while. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating, and really appreciate you having you here. Once again, you can go to and check out and enroll in the Living Crystal website if you haven't already. I just posted a link below in the chat. We may have missed one thing in the Q&A though. All right. Actually, you already answered it through text, and that's from Joseph Ramirez. For sacred pictures, would you recommend the same, charging them for a few hours? Which of course we said, yeah, charge your sacred images, prayer, or whatever energy healing or energy work modality you're trained in, and that'll be very effective. Yeah. And then increased initial baseline of sensitivity. Any crystal works, glass ball works. If you place a glass of water or bottled water in the field of the living crystal device, it charges it very effectively. If you have a crystal or whatever at the top with a certain intention to program the water, depending on the temperature of the water, whether it's room temperature or you're in a cooler environment, will have a direct relation with the level of charge. But also, it'll just be charged even if it's warm water. But the cooler water seems to be more effective at absorbing the intended energy from the living crystal device. Will the device help with core breathing? Absolutely. Great. I think that's all the questions. So we have one open question. Is it possible to change the color of the light being emitted by the device like a variable LED? Bob, Christian?
That is something we're working on for stage 2 devices. The simple answer is it's easy to get a multicolored LED to do that. What we have had problems with is durability. So one of the reasons why we haven't incorporated that initially is they keep burning out, and that doesn't make for happy recipients of the device. So we're working on it. If we can find a way to make it a bit more reliable, we'll definitely be adding that on to follow-on units.
Yeah. In addition to being able to tune into different energy signatures and frequencies using the base device, or having it become like a smart device. Exploring lots of possibilities, but that's what they are existing as right now, possibilities. So in the meantime, we gotta, get this Kickstarter going and make this a viable living product, and get into people's hands, get people practicing and enjoying. All right. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Everybody have a great day, have a great life, and we hope to see you soon. Be well.
Thank you.